welcome you to week 10 of the Freshman 15 series, where we connect with experts to empower you to achieve success personally and academically. Between COVID-19 and the social political unrest across our country and around the world, this has been an unprecedented year, marked by fear and anxiety. Not only have these emotional stressors exposed the weaknesses in our health services, but they have also revealed our need to communicate more effectively, especially in high-risk and emotionally charged conversations. When we decided on the topic of communication, one person came to mind, Christopher Gornold-Smith. Christopher has researched, worked, and instructed on educational media for 6 decades. Working across Europe, he has written and directed hundreds of resources that have been used around the world. In addition, he holds a doctorate of divinity from Southwestern Assemblies of God University, as well as a theological doctorate of law and policy from Regent Theological College. Due to the depth of the material, we decided to divide the topic into 2 audio segments and to extend our normal runtime to 15 minutes. In today's portion, we want to look at just the basics of what is communication. Christopher, I know how intentional you have been throughout your life. You've invested what you have learned in others. And I just want to start by thanking you for giving me this opportunity to share your wisdom with another generation of college students. Now, if this year has shown us anything, it is that we need to be better communicators. And I'm approaching this conversation like an archaeological dig where we're unearthing the forgotten treasures of effective communication. So let's just start from ground zero. What exactly am I looking for? What is a fundamental definition of communication or language?
Communication normally means there's someone else there to speak to. But one can say that within the Holy Trinity, there is forever love and communication. Mm-hmm. But the language is expression as well, but it is expression with content, because a primal howl is an expression through the vocal cords, and it has some content, it has emotional content, just as music has emotional content without words. One has a feeling of what it communicates. But the spoken word has expression, but it has expression with content. Mm-hmm. Expression that has content, whether vocally or written, is language. And it may be hieroglyphics, or it may be an alphabet, which are, and words and so on, but it's still words. The words, spoken word, is expression with content, and with that comes communication. Yeah. But communication itself is surely, initially, something else, that is expression with content. Expression with content is language, is communication. Take away the content aspect of it, and it becomes simply an emotional sound. And so language is the very beginning of being human. And it, a dog can learn, sit, walkies, but that is not the same as creating a series of identifiable representations and then rearranging them from time to time to create new syntaxes, but those as the syntax changes, so the semantics change. So we can actually change our own semantics.
Okay, I understand that communication does require a message giver and a message receiver. And I accept that if my messages lack content or meaning, they're really just emotional expressions, and that does not constitute communication. But what about when we ask Siri to get us directions to the closest gas station? Is that communication?
So far, the artificial intelligence, so called, that I see has to do entirely with syntax, whereas intelligence has to do with semantics. Now, a computer can beat me any day on syntax. A computer can understand hundreds of languages that I can't. I may look up something to get my Latin syntax right on something, and the computer will know what the syntax ought to be when I forget. You know, ut and ne plus a subjunctive, whatever. But the computer has no idea of semantics.
Right.
That I can see a word in Latin and a word in English that correspond to the same thing, but then I can see that there are differences in Latin that I cannot reflect in English.
Yeah.
In English I have a word thing, but in Latin we have res and we have nomina. We have lots of syntax, powerfully so. But where are the semantics? Without a subjective person, can semantics exist? Without a writer and a reader. It's the old thing about, does the tree make a noise if there's no one in the forest and it falls?
Right.
That communication requires the communicator, that the message, and the target audience.
This is really great stuff. I know that I am learning a lot from it, but I want to go back one more time to your foundational description of communication. You suggest that language is the very beginning of being human. This is huge. And I know I would benefit from having a second look at this idea. Can you flesh out this concept for us just a little bit more?
So what does it mean to be human? What makes man different from a beast? In Genesis, when God creates man, even before the creation of man, what the first thing is, when God creates, God says, let there be light. So you've got the concept of thought and expression of thought. In other words, speech. God said. Now, there was no human language.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily suppose that there has to be a heavenly language even, but God says. And when man is made, something happens that didn't happen with any of the other creatures. Man is made a living, we translate it a living soul, but it has the feeling then that man has a soul and the animals don't. But no. The Hebrew word there, isn't it nephesh? That man becomes, it's the same word that's used of the other living creatures.
Right.
But what is different is that then God brings the various animals to Adam, the man, and he gives them names. So you have classification, which is an intellectual process of recognizing patterns and similarities. What are patterns? Patterns are looking at similarities. A man looks at certain animals and certain creatures, birds and fish and reptiles and all the rest, and he sees certain similarities. And so he's creating classifications, and then he gives them names. And the names correspond to the classifications. And the basic classifications in Genesis are animals that are useful to mankind, animals that are not useful to mankind, and then the other things that creep around on the ground, whether they are insects or reptiles or whatever they are. Over centuries, indeed millennia, as languages have grown and morphed, developed, borrowed from each other, we have created a tool in language which serves our practical function and needs as a society. And the need we have to make society work, like the ant, we have to do things together. Mm-hmm. You try to take individualism to an extreme and you lose what it means to be human, because part of being human is being together. This is why solitary confinement is such a dreadful punishment for people, to be isolated. Meaningfulness is found in relationship. The gilded cage. It doesn't matter that it's made of gold. If it's a cage, it's a cage. Human relationships, human freedom, the freedom to respond. And we can only have that where there is respect for each other.
There is a whole lot of information here. So let me briefly recap what I think you're saying to us. Communication serves as a tool to fulfill our human need to create and share meaning. Now, this meaning could be either our perception of what is around us or even our perception of ourselves, making communication critical for both a healthy identity and a healthy community. So, with this groundwork in place and with this better understanding of the essence of communication, I think the next logical question would be, what happens when our communication breaks down?
So we are in a society now where people who have a different view are no longer respected. And if they're not given respect because they have a different view and dare to say so, then the people who are excluding them are actually starting to lose their own humanity. Because if they in the end, they only hear the echo of their own voice. And as within these groups now, everyone is holier than everyone else, means that in the end, that they have to, they themselves can be cancelled by their so-called friends. Everybody is under threat because there is danger in communication. Communication opens a person up, it makes them vulnerable. But if we don't combine that with respect, then we deprive the other person of the fullness of their humanity, which should allow them to have freedom of expression, and at the same time we lose some of our own. Right. In the end, we only hear our own voices, and then we're in solitary confinement.
I know this has not been our normal format for the Freshman 15, where we focus on practical things that we can implement immediately. So I want to thank you for your patience for this topic. I truly believe that you are the future, and the changes we wish to see in our society begin with changes in ourselves and how we interact with one another. I want to remind you to join us next week for the conclusion of this conversation. In addition, don't forget about our weekly club meetings on Wednesdays at noon. You can join us on Zoom or Facebook Live. Until next week, remember, you're not alone in this. And when you're feeling stretched, you're learning.